Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Leveler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else.
So my guest this morning is Sheriff Errol Toulon, Dr. Sheriff Errol Toulon, if you will, and good morning. Thank you for joining with us.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we want to, I guess, just start out with maybe some basics, some background. You know, before you became the sheriff, you had a long career in corrections and law enforcement, and can you just let our listeners know a little bit of your background and how we got to today?
Sure. I followed in my father's footsteps. My father was a warden on Rikers Island, where he worked for 36 years, and in 1982, I became a New York City correction officer working on Rikers Island. Very tumultuous times because back then was the height of the crack cocaine epidemic.
Right.
And so by the late 80s, early 90s, we had almost 25,000 prisoners in our system.
Wow.
So that's 10 jails on Rikers Island, including the borough facilities, courts. And I moved to the ranks. I rose to the rank of captain where I had to retire. I was very fortunate some of the experiences I had while I was there. I was in our emergency service unit for 10 years, responding to hostage situations, gun jobs, escapes, major disturbances in some of our facilities.
Right.
And then also, I was a captain at the Firearms and Tactics Unit on September 11th, and
Wow.
That's at the New York City Police Range up at Rodman's Neck. And so I feel very fortunate because I had a lot of very good and interesting experiences when I worked with the department.
Yeah, no, that's a very long career, and I guess it's worth pointing out. We've had this conversation before with some of the corrections union reps that have come onto the show. Whether it's Nassau or Suffolk or even coming out of the Rikers system with Benny Basio. And there is, I guess, a public perception of what a corrections officer is, and they are lots and lots of things. They're as much caretakers as they are there to kind of contain situations. But some of your history definitely involved that Hollywood movie kind of like what a corrections officer sometimes has to deal with. You were from a unit that would deal with those issues. You weren't a stand in the hallway kind of guy. You were, in and working it.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate because, as you know, I worked 22 years on the uniform side.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a break in between, almost 10 years because of some health issues, and was asked to return eventually back to New York City as the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, where, I had a lot of, and I think the experiences I had as the Deputy Commissioner really prepared me, I guess, for this role as a sheriff because, we had to put through 3,000 candidates. I had our applicant investigation unit, with 3,000 candidates coming through a year. Our training academy, where we had to not only train those recruits, but in service, pre-promotional and executive leadership. Our intelligence bureau, where we had 2,500 gang members identified in our system.
Wow.
Alone.
Yeah.
Our nutritional services, where we had to provide between 15 to 20,000 meals, not only to staff, but inmates. Our compliance division, our emergency management, and our environmental health unit. So, all of those units reporting to me gave me a great perspective of running an agency.
Sure. And I guess it speaks to, I guess your history and your experience speaks to why you were able to step into this job and basically, one, promote your beliefs inside the system. I know you as someone who is heavily focused on recidivism, right? And making sure when people come in, they get the education, they get the encouragement they need to never come back. It's almost as if your goal is to have an empty jail, right? And that's what we should want. And just having that know-how and being able to step in and do the job that you've been doing, I think it's been noticed by the people in Suffolk County, for sure.
I really appreciate it. And, again, it goes back to my dad when I asked him in the late 60s what he did for a living. And he told me he was a correction officer. And I said, what do you do? And he said, we rehabilitate people that are incarcerated. He didn't say, they were bad people. There were obviously, there's clearly some bad people in jail.
Right.
But, there's a lot of people that have issues, mental health, substance abuse. They made poor choices in their lives. And so if we can help them turn their lives around, it's it's better for our public. It's better for public safety.
Sure. And I think everybody can relate in a way to like maybe a point in their younger days where they made a bad choice or they did something and, had things gone differently, they would find themselves in that position. You talk about that percentage of people that are just genuinely, truly, that there's probably nothing anyone can do for them. And that's relatively low compared to the people that made mistakes or had bad information or, maybe even just, gave into peer pressure, didn't have, the guts to say, hey, I don't think this is the right thing. And, so that's good, just to be able to move that forward and get people back into society and have them contributing. So one of the things I wanted to bring up also, not everybody understands the difference between a police officer and a sheriff. And, it's probably good to just maybe discuss that for a little bit and get your takeaway on, the differences you see there.
Sure. So the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, just in general, was established in 1683. So there's a long history and probably one of the oldest law enforcement agencies in Suffolk County. Other law enforcement agencies, if we take the Suffolk County Police Department, was established in 1960. So, my role as the sheriff, I'm the chief law enforcement officer for Suffolk County, overseeing the two facilities in Riverhead and Yaphank. Also, I have 900 correctional officers that approximately work in those two jails. And then I have about 240 deputy sheriffs that are sworn police officers that have an interesting function. Not only do they usually patrol the east end of Long Island, specifically, sometimes on Sunrise Highway, but we also issue pistol licenses to those residents that live on the east end of Long Island. We have a warrant section. We do orders of protection, ERPOs, which is extreme risk protection orders. If someone was to, a family member was to say that someone has a firearm in their home and they think that they're going to harm themselves or someone else, they can petition a judge, and then within 72 hours, we would remove that firearm, and then within 72 hours, they would have to go before a judge and have a hearing. Our deputies also work in our courts. And they also do the transportation of our inmates to and from court or to any other facility. So, we have a lot of different responsibilities. We also have several deputy sheriffs and correctional officers on federal, state, and local task force from HSI to DEA.
Right.
So, we're very well versed not only in the law enforcement but also the rehabilitation portion.
Sure. Yeah, and that's, I think that's... It's worth bringing up just for people to understand the difference when they see a deputy sheriff out there. That isn't someone that isn't a law enforcement professional. That's like maybe, they're not gonna, if I'm speeding past the deputy sheriff, they're not gonna say anything because they're probably just gonna be dealing with like a court-related issue or whatever else. They're genuine law enforcement officers that are empowered to actually do the job. Yeah,
that's correct, because our deputy sheriffs go through the same 6-month academy with all police officers in Suffolk County. So they receive the same training and are sworn to be uphold the law as police officers.
Sure, and listen, just earlier this week, both AME, the corrections officers, and the deputy sheriffs all came together along with you. A myriad of people from the community, some supporters, political folks that kind of helped make all of this stuff happen, and participated in the National Night Out. And I wonder if you can just tell us the significance of the National Night Out event.
So the first Tuesday in August nationally is when law enforcement and communities come together, and we host these events. We meaning the law enforcement community. We've been very fortunate. We hosted our first one in 2018 with about 300 people. And then our next one in 2019, we had 1,000. And last Tuesday, with you and the town of Brookhaven and Supervisor Romaine, we had over 2,500 people attending. And it's really good for me to walk around and talk to people in our community, for them to see the different vehicles and speak to our deputy sheriffs, speak to our correction officers. Of course, there was a softball game. There were many events. There was an ice cream truck a tug of war, there was
Sure.
bingo, many different, and I think it's a great way for our community and law enforcement to really come together, especially after what occurred last year,
Sure.
where there's such dissension and social unrest in our throughout our nation.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed that I really liked about that event, just from my perspective, is I saw a lot of younger people there, not only just enjoying themselves, but interacting with law enforcement, uniformed, there to, see the community and present themselves. There's a lot of smiling faces, and it's just, it speaks to me of what the future looks like, and being able to, show people that, law enforcement isn't always just what the papers say. There is a lot of good things that happen, and a lot of protecting of people. So I just from my perspective, it was great to see so many young people smiling, enjoying, and interacting with all of the folks from the sheriff's office. So it's a good thing. So let's talk about, I feel like I bring this up every time I have somebody in here for at least the last 18 months, so it should be no surprise where I'm going. But COVID, it was it's a very unique thing, I guess, in the jail system, right? Because when we talk about some other jobs, people come and go. But in the jail system, there are people that come and go. They work their shift and they leave. And then there are people that are there all the time. And we heard some very difficult things, especially, when we talk about Rikers, some of the things that were happening over there, that were happening to the workforce, that were happening to the inmates. Suffolk was able to avoid all of that. But, that coming into this job and saying, okay, yes, I'll be the sheriff, and having your goals and actualizing those goals, and then also just a little sprinkling of a global pandemic / fiscal crisis. How did that work out in Suffolk County in the jail system? And
Right. We know that the first case of COVID in the United States was January 19th in Washington, and so when our staff started to track that. One of the things, I had the experience of dealing with the Ebola virus when I was a deputy commissioner on Rikers Island, and I remember speaking to our public health officials, and they had really informed me how quickly a virus can move through, a correctional environment. So we started planning the end of February, if this was really going to be an outbreak. Of course, the first case in New York State was on March 1st, and then March 8th was the first case in Suffolk County. So we decided to really close off our jails so we didn't have any visitors or service providers. We required all our staff to wear masks. We had temperatures being taken. Our female inmates were kind enough to engage in a mask making program.
Nice.
Where they made over 30,000 masks. So each inmate was able to be issued 2 washable masks, but also those extra masks we were able to distribute to our community. So religious institutions, healthcare institutions, grocery stores, all received masks really in the beginning of that pandemic in
Right.
April of May of 2020. We also provided extra cleaning supplies to our inmates. We also cell-skipped so that every inmate was in cell 1357 instead
Makes
of 1,
sense.
2, 3, 4. We really made sure that there was no congregation. We actually stopped our lineups, which are very similar to roll calls, which other law enforcement agencies call, so there was no congregation. Our staff weren't permitted to congregate in our mess halls or where gatherings are for our meals.
Right.
And we also sanitize our facility 3 to 4 times a day, most heavily on the evening tour or midnight tour, because that's when there's less traffic.
Sure.
So I think we were very fortunate, because from March, when the pandemic was first declared, until the beginning of December, we only had 3 inmates that tested positive.
Right.
And then once that second wave came in the middle of December, we got hit pretty hard also, but we were able to contain it by January and February.
Right. I guess it's just very unique, that jail environment and having to deal with COVID. But again, just looking at what the numbers were in other places and how it worked out in the Suffolk County system, I gotta not just tip my hat to you, but your entire team, putting forward these efforts and having the willingness to take the steps to protect everyone involved.
Right. Thank you.
So let's talk about maybe, I don't know if I want to say it quite this way, but, We're talking about protecting everyone involved, and there seems to be two sides of this issue as to whether or not it's protecting people or is harmful. But bail reform, that's an issue. That was something that we as a labor union went to the state and had conversations with folks up there about, along with people with a vested interest in this system and making sure that it's done correctly, and that, along with discovery changes, those were big changes. But I'm wondering what your take is on bail reform.
I found it very challenging, where I thought the intent was well meant by trying. If someone is charged with a misdemeanor, has a low level, doesn't have an extensive criminal background, a $250 or $500 bail where they can't meet that, I can understand this legislation. But some of the crimes that were incorporated really endangered our public, with individuals committing crimes and then being released. I actually went up to Albany, probably one of the few in my own political party that tried to stand up and really wanted to encourage our state legislators to relook at this bill that they had introduced, because of the detriment that it could provide really to Suffolk County residents. But as we saw all throughout New York State, especially in New York City, where the crime rate and the shootings have increased exponentially over the last year and a half. And so, I'm hoping that there was an amendment to the legislation.
Sure.
I still think that they need to look at it a lot further, even with the discovery portion. Even we meaning the Sheriff's Office, has a very small part when it comes to the discovery process. We do have individuals that we arrest, but not as much as the police departments or the district attorney's office,
right,
that has that issue with discovery and turning that information over to a defendant's attorney within 15 days.
Yeah, and I think that's really what we were getting at too when we were up there, and we were up there, independent of, I guess, basically anyone. We had our own issues with some of these legislative changes, and what it really came down to for us, what our ask was, we understand the intent. The intent is good. Maybe we need to just slow this down a little bit. This is a very big change, very quickly, and let's maybe we released a short list of things that everybody can agree on, right, while we work through the other things. But ultimately, things went the way they did. I think cooler heads prevailed about a year later and said, maybe this went too far, and let's walk some of it back. But I think there's still work to be done there. Yeah.
And absolutely, somebody, like I looked at some of the individuals that we released from our facilities. One was sexual performance, obscene performance with a child. There's no way that individual should be returning back to our community. Another individual, strangulation. He was attempted to strangulate his girlfriend, and so we're forgetting about the victims in these crimes, which is the most important thing. There are victims to these crimes, and we do not want these predators to return back to our community to continue with the victims or anyone else.
And that not to get too far off topic, but that in its essence, I think, is what's lost in some of these conversations. When we talk about reform, when we talk about the work that law enforcement does, again, our members are support in that whole system, the civilian workforce, but very much integral to getting all of these things done. And at the end of the day, I feel like that's the voice that gets left out. Right. We do talk about victims when maybe things aren't handled properly on the enforcement side. But we stop talking about victims when we get into the people we're trying to protect by, again, maybe keeping someone who was involved in a strangulation and keeping them away, giving them some time to, maybe work through the issue and not just 24 hours later be back out on the street. So
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So let's now, I guess, get into some of the successes that you've had in your administration. And I mean, there is a lot of things to talk about. I could bring up subjects, but I don't think anybody's going to know about the successes that you've brought to the table. 'Cause I know you've been thinking about this stuff for years, and now being in a position to actually implement. So, how do you feel about the progress,
I feel very pleased, not only with the progress that we made, but also the transformation in the office, where I guess my vision is being seen by the rest of the members that work in the sheriff's office. So, when I took office, one of my goals was to get to the kids before they get to me. So I was in 1 to 2 schools per week prior to COVID, talking to students, and the 4 central themes seemed to be bullying, vaping, opioids, and gangs.
Right.
More vaping, no matter where I went in Suffolk County. But those other 3 were very pervasive when I talked to the young men and women. And actually, if you come into my Yapang facility in our waiting room, there's a little saying that says, "I want to get to the kids before they get to me." And then I realized that we needed to do something a little bit more, so we partnered with the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation.
Yes.
And what we did was we adopted 2 of their programs. Our staff was trained in the Say Something or Start With Hello program. And the Start With Hello is basically a child walks into a classroom, sees one of their classmates isolated, alone, and they just go over and start that conversation, even if it's in the cafeteria.
Right.
And just to try and engage with the child. And the Say Something is if they were to hear that someone wants to harm themselves, harm someone in the school, or do something destructive, they would report it to a trusted adult. Very pleased with those programs because they're very community related. Going out into the schools, I didn't realize that when you go to one school district, you see that there are the security guards had red polo shirts and they're armed. You go to another school district, they're white polo shirts and they're not armed. Go to a third school district, they're blue polo shirts and they're advertised as retired law enforcement, but you don't know if they're armed or unarmed.
Right.
And so if we meaning the law enforcement community, had to respond to an active shooter event, what are the protocols? So we held a conference with all the school superintendents throughout Suffolk County just to get a better understanding of protocols, what they put in place, and how to respond. So now the Suffolk County Police Department has taken it a step further with RAVE and other things.
Sure.
So that's really made our schools much safer, and also a lot of our school districts have hardened their entrances so that there's no unlawful entry to any school building. We then did threat assessments. Any school district that wanted us to do a threat assessment, it's a 3-day process where we would go in, go through the security procedures. Another day we would come in. The superintendent would be the only one to know. We would then see if there's any ways we can gain access into the building.
Right.
And then we would then follow up with the report that's confidential with the school district and the sheriff's office, really to give them a good idea of a threat assessment. We then realized that we had there was about 1,400 inmates when I started as a sheriff. We realized over 300 of them were over the age of 50.
Wow. Yeah.
And, as of Monday, and for the longest, up until 3 months ago, I had 2 over the age of 70. Now I'm down to 1. But when you think about an individual over the age of 70 and is a male in with an 18 or 19-year-old,
right.
That's not the best conducive area for rehabilitation or any type of reform. So we created a pod for those that were 55 and over to really work with them. We continue with the Veterans Pod and SATP programs that was created or started by my predecessor.
Right.
But then we created a program when Governor Cuomo implemented the Raise the Age legislation, where 16 and 17-year-olds are no longer incarcerated in any jail in New York State. So what we did, we created a program called Choose Your Path for 18 to 26-year-old individuals, and they have to work a 40-hour workday in the jail.
Right.
And then they come back, and we had classes and skills such as resume building, anger management, parenting, carpentry, landscaping, and also small engine repair. And right before COVID, we were ready to introduce HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and solar. That was what the inmates had specifically asked me, because those skills are pretty transferable when they leave our facility and return back to the community, because the average stay in our facility is only 26 days.
Right.
We then created a program called Choose to Thrive for our female population and moved half of them from our older Riverhead facility to our Yapang facility, and brought in service providers such as ECLI and New Hour for Women and Children that are really helping these women with the issues that they're confronted with. We did realize that we have many women in our system that are victims of human trafficking. So I'm proud to say that we're the first jail in the country to have a human trafficking unit inside the jail. We then created a new intelligence bureau, focusing, we had the old traditional gang unit,
Sure.
but the intelligence bureau focuses now on human trafficking, gangs, violent crimes, and the opioid crisis. I actually went to El Salvador for a week to learn more about MS-13.
Right.
And then went to LA a few months later because MS-13, the Bloods and the Crips all started in Los Angeles, believe it or not,
Yeah.
and have somehow migrated to the East Coast. So I wanted to learn more about what trends or patterns could be occurring that we may be faced with here in Suffolk County. The last two things I like to talk about as far as rehabilitation is we partner with Stony Brook University. Their School of Social Welfare, their graduate students, interns, are working with our inmates. It's a family reunification project that we're working to keep our strengthened bond between the incarcerated individual and their families. So our staff,
It's important.
correction staff, it really is.
Yeah.
Correction staff, inmate population, families are all working together to try and keep that bond, whether they return back to the community or they have to go upstate and do some state time. And then finally, we have a START Resource Center, and START is an acronym for Sheriff's Transition and Reentry Team. And what we do now is because we worked on trying to get to the kids before they get to us, and then we created some rehabilitation programs inside the facility. But then what happens when they leave us? Where do they go? If they house in our Riverhead facility and returning back to Babylon and not know where the services are, what's going to happen with them? So we've identified 7 correction officers by title, but they have been trained, 2 have been trained to be community correction officers and the other 5 as correction counselors. And what we're doing is we're working with these individuals post-incarceration, not only when they leave our Riverhead or Yaphank facility, but anyone returning from state prison
Right.
and coming back to Suffolk County, or anyone that has had any justice involvement in another state and now lives in Suffolk County. We're willing to help them with all the services in that particular area. I'm proud to say that we opened up the first satellite facility in Wyandanch with Spin the Yard.
Right.
AT&T was able to give us a $40,000 grant to kick this off, and we're looking to create other satellite facilities throughout Suffolk County because transportation is, as you know, a huge issue in our county.
Sure.
And trying to get individuals back to Yaphank outside of our facility is very challenging. So if we can create these satellite facilities, then I think we'll be very successful.
Yeah, that's smart. And listen, that's, all of that was a mouthful. So many initiatives, either progressing into them or starting them for the first time. But, a couple of things struck me, keeping families, however possible, keeping them together, keeping that family bond, that has to translate very well to folks moving out of the correctional facility and back into day-to-day life. Right. Talking about these satellite facilities, again, hugely, but I guess the thing that really struck me the most ties back to something earlier, talking about going out and seeing the kids and talking with the kids and that goal of, again, for one day there to be no inmates, right? And that's a lofty goal, right? But I saw that bear out, at National Night Out. There were, again, just a lot of kids, a lot of smiling faces, a lot of, hope for the future. And, it really takes somebody with the desire and the know-how to take those steps and start building that bridge into the community. So, again, gotta commend you for, taking your years of experience and your personal values and applying them to a department and getting it done.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, there are some events coming up that we'd like to talk about that you get involved in. One of them being the New York Cancer Foundation's Hockey for Hope.
Right.
And then we have the Executive Leadership Conference in Stony Brook. So if you could just let us know, briefly what your involvement is there and what those things are.
Sure. So New York Cancer and Blood Foundation provides monetary assistance to individuals that are battling cancer and have reached the financial threshold where they have difficulty meeting their bills. So the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office has a hockey team I am a member of that team.
Yes, you are.
I love to play. But we decided to put together a charity game. It's going to be at Dix Hills on August 28th, at Dix Hills Rink, at 6 o'clock. Tickets, you can go on Ticket Leap or on the Cancer Foundation website. All of the money that they make goes directly to cancer patients. None of it goes to any administrative fees or anything like that. It's something, as a two-time cancer survivor myself,
Sure.
I greatly appreciate what they do for cancer patients. And so we're hoping to raise a lot of money for them. I think it's going to be a great time.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to it. Our executive leadership conference, my staff and I were talking about how do we bring, especially after what occurred last year between bail reform, COVID, the George Floyd killing.
Right.
How do we help future leaders think about leading through adversity? And that's the theme of the conference, which is going to be on October 5th and 6th at the Wong Center at Stony Brook University. And we have some tremendous speakers. Former Commissioner, NYPD Commissioner, Boston Commissioner, LAPD Commissioner. Bill Bratton will be our keynote speaker with Deputy Commissioner John Miller. We also have former Police Commissioner Geraldine Hart, our current District Attorney Tim Sinney, former Congressman Peter King, the president of Adelphi University, Christine Reardon, and Perry Williams, who's a two-time Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants. So I think we have we've put together some really great speakers. I think it's going to be very informative. We're inviting leaders throughout Suffolk, Nassau, New York City, even some upstate that have inquired about attending. And we think it's really going to be beneficial for everybody that participates.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great conference for sure. And, again, your work, hockey skills notwithstanding, you were very, the times that I've seen you play at events like this, it's impressive. I myself can do one thing on the ice, and that's fall onto it. But all of that, those are great things. But your work with the cancer groups, again, it's just something that I think demonstrates your character. Someone who has personal experience, knows what it's like, has know-how, has compassion, and gets out and gets in and gets things done. So just another thing that we can appreciate about you.
Thank you.
So lastly, I guess in closing, it's great to have you here. We are happy to have these conversations, and whenever you've got a message that you want to get out into the world, we're here. We'd love to help with that. But you have a little communication you've been doing yourself called A New Perspective. So can you just tell us about that and where people can tune in so that this way, if they want to know more and they want to keep up on the latest, they can get it directly?
Sure. We decided to have this little show that it's on YouTube, and it's also available on the Suffolk Sheriff website, that we can inform our residents and our constituents of the different things, specifically in law enforcement or even some community-related issues. So I've been fortunate enough to go around, and I've spoken to Chief Skranicki from Southampton, or Chief Chris Isola from Quogue Village, and really not only inform our residents, because a lot of times we forget about our East End town police, who provide a valuable service to all of our residents, but also what are some of the things that are occurring in Suffolk County, and give our residents a new perspective of how things are done, whether it's in our jails, whether it's policing, or different activities. So I'm hoping to have you on very shortly.
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think I get interviewed very often. I do the interviewing. That might be interesting.
Well, your members are very valued in our facility,
Yes.
and they perform from our civil bureau to our accounting to our medical staff, and
Sure.
I personally signed and wrote a letter to all of our medical staff, thanking them for the work that they did during COVID, because they had to be at work every single day. They had very challenging jobs. They also had to deal with their own issues, like
Sure.
we all do every
Yeah.
single day. But they were there day in and day out, and so our civilian staff are second to none. I feel that work in the sheriff's office, and I appreciate the work that they do every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And we've heard from them. There are things that are very important to them when they bring that stuff to us. And we talk and we work on. But by and large, I think they enjoy the work that they do. I think that they understand that they're helping society by being there, that they could do this type of medical work in other places, but it wouldn't have the same value in their life as it does, working in this system. So, but again, just a reminder to everyone that A New Perspective can be seen on YouTube and also the Suffolk County Sheriff's website, and that the New York Cancer Foundation Hockey for Hope is on August 28th, and you can go to Ticket Leap if you want to get involved in that. It's definitely going to be a great night. And the 2021 Executive Leadership Conference will be October 5th and 6th. And Sheriff, thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing some of what you bring to the world.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.